I am now prepared to rule on the question of privilege raised on November 16, 2011 by the Honourable Member for Mount Royal regarding the negative impact an organised telephone campaign survey conducted in his constituency has had on his work and reputation. Je remercie l'honorable député de Mont-Royal d'avoir soulevé cette importante question, d'avoir répondu aux commentaires des autres députés et d'avoir fourni à la présidence des documents étayant ces allégations. Je remercie également le leader du gouvernement à la Chambre, le leader à la Chambre de l'opposition officielle et les députés de Richmond, Athabasca, Saanich Gulf Islands et de Humber, St. Barbe, Baie-Verte pour leurs commentaires, ainsi que le député de Nouveau-Brunswick Sud-Ouest pour ses interventions. In presenting his case, the Honourable Member for Mount Royal stated that several constituents had contacted him about survey calls they had received from a telephone number identified as Campaign Research Inc., asking if they would support the Conservative Party in the, quote, impending if not imminent by-election, unquote. He has also informed the House that similar calls were placed to citizens in the Westmount Bill Marie constituency. The Honourable Member for Mount Royal stated that this telephone campaign led his constituents and other voters to think that he had deserted his post and overshadowed his parliamentary work. Noting that the House has the right to the services of its members free from intimidation, obstruction and interference, he claimed that the confusion created among his electors was damaging his reputation and his credibility. En l'espace, personne ne me met en doute le fait qu'il n'y a pas d'élection partielle à venir. Or, le député de Montréal a expliqué qu'il se trouve dans une situation ambiguë à cause de ce sondage téléphonique. Il a dit, et je cite, "Simply put, how am I or any other member to effectively represent a constituency if the constituents are led to believe that the member is no longer their elected representative? How can one correct the confusion and prejudicial damage that has been done in the minds of those who may think I am no longer their representative in Parliament or no longer discharging my duties?" Unquote. Pour étayer son argument, le député a cité une décision rendue le 6 mai 1985 par le président Bosley à la page 4439 des débats, et je cite, "Il va sans dire qu'un député doit exercer ses fonctions comme il faut et que toute tentative de semer la confusion sur l'identité d'un député risque d'empêcher ce député de remplir ses fonctions comme il se doit. Toute initiative qui empêche ou vise à empêcher un député d'exercer ses fonctions est une atteinte au privilège." Fin de la citation. The Chair finds striking the repeated emphasis that the member has placed on the importance of this issue, not only for himself but for all members. This point has also been stressed by other members who intervened. Because of the Chair's primordial concern for the preservation of the privileges of all members, this is a matter worthy of serious consideration. As your Speaker, one of my principal responsibilities is to ensure that the rights and privileges of members are safeguarded, and this is a responsibility I take very seriously. The member for New Brunswick Southwest argues, on the contrary, that the House should not even be seized of this question because, quote, "it lies outside its authority," unquote. He claims that, quote, "the conduct of political parties should not be judged by the House or by its members. The best place for this to be judged is among Canadians, not in the House," unquote. La présidence ne doute pas que les Canadiens jugent effectivement de la question, puisqu'ils jugent constamment la Chambre selon ce qui se passe et ce qui se dit dans son ancien, et selon l'attitude qu'adoptent les députés les uns envers les autres. It does not matter that the resources of the House of Commons itself were not used to carry on this particular campaign. On this point, let me point out that the rights and immunities of individual members can be breached by a wide range of actions, and that such actions are not limited, as has been suggested, to actions taken in the House or actions involving the use of House resources. At the same time, in listening to the arguments on this question, I have seen that a certain confusion seems to exist with regard to the extent of the powers of the Speaker in dealing with questions of privilege. Several members have ascribed to the Chair seemingly vast powers that neither I nor my predecessors have ever possessed. The role of the Chair is actually very limited, as the Honourable Member for Mount Royal has himself pointed out, citing O'Brien and Bosk at page 145, quote, "The issue before the Speaker is not a finding of fact. It is simply whether, on first impression, the issue that is before the House warrants priority consideration over all other matters, all other orders of the day that are before the House," unquote. Dans les cas où un député prétend avoir été victime d'ingérence dans l'exercice de ses fonctions parlementaires, la tâche du président est particulièrement difficile. On peut lire ceci à la page 111 de l'ouvrage d'O'Brien et Bosk, et je cite, "Il est impossible de codifier tous les incidents qui pourraient être considérés comme des cas d'obstruction, d'ingérence, de brutalité ou d'intimidation et par conséquent constituer une atteinte au privilège de prime abord." Fin de la citation. Furthermore, in ruling on questions of privilege of this kind, the Chair is obliged to assess whether or not the member's ability to fulfill his parliamentary functions has been undermined. House of Commons Procedure and Practice, second edition, at page 109, notes that my predecessors have stressed the importance of establishing a direct link to parliamentary duties in such cases, stating that, quote, rulings have focused on whether or not the parliamentary functions of the member were directly involved. While frequently noting that members raising such matters have legitimate grievances, speakers have consistently concluded that members have not been prevented from carrying out their parliamentary duties, unquote. Dans les décisions du président Bosley citées par le député de Mont-Royal, le président était confronté à une situation où un ancien député était présenté dans un document publicitaire comme le député en poste. Dans ce cas, c'est l'identité même du député en poste qui se trouvait questionnée. In the case at hand, the Chair is entirely sympathetic to the situation faced by the member for Mount Royal. There is no doubt that he has been bombarded by telephone calls, emails, and faxes from concerned and confused constituents. However, the Chair has great difficulty in concluding that the member has been unable to carry out his parliamentary duties as a result of these tactics. The member for Mount Royal has been extremely active in the House and in committee. By raising the matter in the House as he has done, the honourable member has brought attention to a questionable form of voter identification practice and described in detail the negative impact it has had. Indeed, his interventions here in the House on this very question have garnered, as he himself points out, extensive sympathetic coverage in media across the country. In a ruling delivered on August 12, 1988, Debates, page 18272, Speaker Fraser stated that, quote, past precedents are highly restrictive and generally require that clear evidence of obstruction or interference with a member in the exercise of his or her duty be demonstrated in order to form the basis for a claim of breach of privilege, unquote. Speaker Milliken, in a ruling from February 12, 2009, also stressed this point, quote, in adjudicating questions of privilege of this kind, the Speaker is bound to assess whether or not the member's ability to fulfill his parliamentary functions effectively has been undermined. As I consider the member for Mount Royal's case, a second ruling by Speaker John Fraser has resonated particularly for me. On May 5, 1987, Speaker Fraser concluded, quote, given all the circumstances in this case, I am sure that the minister's capacity to function as a minister and a member of this House is in no way impaired. I point out to honourable members that this is the real issue of privilege. Although there are obviously other matters that surround the particular fact in this case, the Chair has to look very carefully at the exact point of privilege, unquote. In today's case, too, the so-called surrounding matters have given me pause. I am sure that all reasonable people would agree that attempting to sow confusion in the minds of voters as to whether or not their member is about to resign is a reprehensible tactic and that the honourable member for Mount Royal has a legitimate grievance. J'espère que d'avoir pu faire connaître ces revendications ainsi que les discussions auxquelles a donné lieu la présente affaire dans les médias et ici à la Chambre mèneront à deux résultats. D'une part, les responsables de campagnes légitimes d'identification des électeurs seront plus prudents dans le choix de renseignements qu'ils communiquent aux participants. D'autre part, les Canadiens participant à de telles campagnes seront plus méfiants et plus critiques à l'endroit des renseignements que leur présentés lors d'appels non sollicités. I can understand how the member for Mount Royal and others are seeking relief from the climate of cynicism, not to say contempt, about parliamentary institutions and practice that seem to prevail. But I fear that such relief is not within my gift. The Speaker's power in these matters are limited, as my predecessors have repeatedly stated. The words of Mr. Speaker Fraser in a ruling of December 11, 1991 seem particularly apt in these circumstances. Quote, the Chair can devise no strategy, however aggressive or interventionist, and can imagine no codification, however comprehensive or strict, that will as successfully protect the Canadian parliamentary traditions that we cherish, as will each member's sense of justice and fair play. Especially at this time of crisis of confidence in our parliamentary institutions, our constituents deserve and will tolerate no less, unquote. Accordingly, after studying the precedents in these matters, I am not able on technical grounds to find that a prima facie case of privilege exists in this case. Je remercie encore une fois l'honorable député de Mont-Royal d'avoir porté cette sérieuse et importante question à l'attention de la Chambre et des Canadiens. Orders of the day, order du jour.
Government orders, government bills, comments. Resuming debate at third reading on Bill C-20, the Fair Representation Act.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Hamilton Centre has 17 and a half minutes to conclude his remarks. Royal, on a point of order.
I just want to say that your ruling, interestingly enough, which you said was a technical ruling, I believe that on technical matters, since I was the only one to cite principles and precedents, there wasn't one intervention by any government member that referenced any principle and precedent which should have been referenced in your ruling as they were. And the ones that were referenced in your ruling would seem, in my view, to have accorded with the claims that I made in my point of privilege, not only on technical matters, but on substantive matters. And so, Mr. Speaker, while I have no other recourse and will always respect the rulings of this House, as all honourable members do, I do have to say that I think if you would revisit the principles and precedents that were cited in my submissions to you, and as, again I say, and none on the other side, you might, on revisiting it, might at some point in the future reconsider this ruling. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I can assure the honourable member that I reflected a great deal on this matter, and I hope that was reflected in the ruling I gave. The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.